invite you to rise for the proclamation of our gospel today that comes to us from the second chapter of St. Matthew. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. I invite you to be seated. I want to ask you to take out your pew Bibles for a second. Well, it's going to be for a couple minutes, actually. And if you would, turn to page 1157. And then just set it on your lap. 1157. It's Isaiah 60, 1 through 6. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So, many of you may have heard through the grapevine that I made my way south last week on a little family reunion vacation. We ended up in the panhandle of Florida. See, my mother-in-law has been pretty sick over the past year, and she finally decided it was time to get the family back together. It had been over 10 years since we were all together in the same place, so she rented a 15-bedroom home 4 blocks from the beach. And we had family descending from all parts of the Midwest and South. And so my wife Bonnie and our 2 grown kids ventured down on Christmas Day. And we got there first, and we were there to welcome people. And so as the family arrived from Texas, and then the family from Tennessee, and then the family from Alabama, we were able to greet them. And as you can imagine, there were lots of hugs and smiles and laughter and embraces that were very warm as people came together after not seeing each other for quite a while. Some of my nieces and nephews having grown from this last time I saw them to this and graduating. And it was really heartwarming. And we spent the week at this house together. Well, before I get into that. So after we get done embracing and welcoming everybody, then comes the unloading of the cars. And so the luggage comes in first, right? And everybody goes up and claims their bedrooms. Then the food and beverages come in, right? And there's just a cupboard, 2 cupboards piled full of food for the week of families. There were 21 of us together. And so there was this abundance of love and resources and food. And we spent the week telling stories and catching up and putting puzzles together and playing games and watching lots of football. And we had to watch the Alabama game. We watched the Iowa State game too. and the Iowa game, and we had lots to rejoice about. And so it was fun time together. And there was some really neat things that happened during the week. Even though it rained all 5 days we were there, we got exactly 45 minutes on the beach. And just to mock us, Mother Nature decides to put the sun out as we're driving away. We watched it in our rearview mirror. But we kept good spirits. And while we were together, the time that we were together, two of my wife's siblings who hadn't spoken to each other in 7 years reconciled. Which is a powerful thing to watch. When there's so much hurt and enmity and misunderstanding that is able to be replaced by relationship and presence. And the surrounding of the family allowed that to happen. It was neat to be a part of that, to witness that. And I don't know if any of you had similar kinds of experiences this Christmas. Maybe you had a family reunion. Maybe you had an opportunity to get together with people you hadn't seen in a while. So even though our travel back was frustrating, we missed our connecting flight, we had to rent a car and drive back from Chicago late in the evening. It took me 3 days to recover. When I look back on the week down in Florida, it was filled with a lot of warmth and good memories. And the reason I take time to tell you about that is because it helps me to understand what Isaiah is talking about in chapter 60. And the reason why I want us to spend a little time, if you look at your Bibles for a second with me, this is a prophecy that Isaiah offered to the Israelite people back in 539 BC. They had been away from their homes for 50 years. They'd been away from their promised land for 50 years. They were separated, families scattered throughout the region, and they longed to be together again. And in 539, Cyrus of Persia, the king at that time, defeated Babylon and brought the Jews back to Jerusalem. And when they got back, what did they see? A destroyed temple, fields that were lying fallow, people they didn't know inhabiting their homes and their city. There was enmity, there was struggle, there was arguing among the leadership and among the families. The resources were scarce, and they wondered how they were going to survive. And Isaiah proclaims to them this beautiful prophecy, and I just want to invite you to read it along with me as soon as I find it. And he proclaims to them, I'm looking at verse 1 of chapter 60. Read this with me. Arise, arise, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Your sons come from afar, and your daughters are carried on the hip. Then you will look and be radiant. Your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth on the seas will be brought to you. To the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camels will cover your land. Young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense, and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. Do you get the family reunion that's being proclaimed here by Isaiah to the Israelite people to lift their hearts, to give them hope? See, they were looking around, and what Isaiah was saying to them is, don't focus on the broken. Don't focus on what's been destroyed. Don't focus on what's missing and who's missing. Don't focus on the absence of resources. Focus on the promise of God and God's presence among you. Look at each other. You are the promise of God. You are here, and your sons will return to you. Why? Because they will know the light of God is shining forth again from the city of Jerusalem, the city of peace, the city of Yahweh God. And they will come back to you, your daughters, with their maidens. They will come back bringing gifts. They will come back with abundance, and you will know God's prosperity again. Focus on the God who is among you, who shines in you and through you. That's the invitation from Isaiah. This is a family reunion. And so we have this gospel passage today. I'm thinking about travel. I'm thinking about people coming together, about reunions, and these magi that we hear about today in our gospel from Matthew. We sing this song, We Three Kings, and it can be a little bit misleading because these magi were not the traditional kings. They're not the European kings we're thinking about. Magi, the word actually means sage or wise person. And these were learned people from the land of Persia, from the land of Cyrus, the place where Cyrus freed the Jews to come back. These were wise people who were astronomers. They were learned in the ways of the heavens. And see, these people were searching and hungering and seeking for the same thing that the Israelites were hungering for in their Messiah. These Persians lived in the Parthian Empire. It bordered up against the Roman Empire. But their king at that time was even more ruthless, more murderous than Herod the Great. He was known to have killed his father and 30 brothers in order to stay on the throne. And it wasn't even a united empire that he reigned over. It was a bunch of city-states, a bunch of tribes who were constantly squabbling and fighting over resources and over who had control. And the people desperately wanted someone to unite them, to show them again the freedom and the love of their God. And this is what they were searching for. This is what they were hungering for. And so they looked every night to the heavens. Because what they believed in the ancient Middle East is that the sky, the nighttime sky, is a mirror of earth. And in the sky were the nations of earth. And if you could perceive something happening in the sky, you could predict something happening on the earth. And so what we're told is that in about 2 BC, they noticed something in the house of Israel. That means in the sky, the part of the sky that was designated as the house of Israel. They saw a cosmic event that caught their attention. It was greater than any cosmic event they had noticed in their lives. It drew their attention, and it gave them hope because they perceived in it that God, Creator God, had birthed a super king in the house of Israel. And they thought to themselves, this is someone who will bring us meaning and purpose for our lives. And they followed that star to find meaning and purpose and to build a relationship with that one who could possibly bring them their heart's desire. You know, we all hunger in our lives for meaning and purpose, don't we? That's a basic thing. We spend our lives trying to find why we're here, right? What's my destiny? What's unique about me? What do I have to bring to this world? And we follow stars in our lives in trying to figure that out. I mean, if you think about when you're young, who are the stars that you follow? Maybe some of your friends, maybe cartoon characters, maybe it's a grandparent or a neighbor, maybe it's an older sibling that you look up to, maybe even a parent. Oh my gosh. Who are the stars that you follow in your lives? As you get older and you become like a teenager, adolescent, who do you start to follow? Celebrities, athletes, politicians, people in the neighborhood, people you meet in school, coaches. As you grow older, who are the stars that you follow? Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's an educator. Maybe it's wealth. Maybe it starts to become material stuff that you strive for, that brings a kind of meaning to your life. And you find yourself dedicating your energy to that. That becomes the heart of your journey through life, seeking that. Who's your star right now? Who are you following in your life right now to find meaning and purpose? So these magi set out, as Laura mentioned, on this treacherous journey over 1,000 miles. They had to traverse the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. They had to go through deserts and over mountains. It was dangerous. And they kept their eyes focused on this. We don't know if it was a supernova or an aligning of the planets, but it was taking them to Israel. And they traveled a year, maybe 2. And they finally get to Jerusalem. And they go in search of the king. And where do they go looking for the king? To the palace. Seems logical, right? And who do they encounter in the palace in Jerusalem? Herod the Great. Herod was ruthless. Herod had murdered 16 of his own sons who he felt threatened him for the throne of Israel. And he was trying to win over the favor of the Jewish people by building immense buildings for them. He built a pier out of Caesarea Maritima. He rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, and he whitewashed the walls, and he covered it with gold. The grapes that hung from the parapet were the size of bowling balls. And I think he had the image of Isaiah in his mind when he did this. Because what he wanted is the light of God to reflect out of Jerusalem to anybody who was traveling towards the city. That they would look to Jerusalem and say, oh my God, what is that I'm being drawn to in Jerusalem? This immense temple for honoring God was built by Herod to honor himself. And the Magi go to Herod. And when they tell him they've seen the star of the new king, he's so threatened that he calls together all the leaders of Jerusalem. What is this about a new king? Where's he supposed to be born? I need to find out. And they tell him. And he plays nice. Oh, Magi, go find the child. Jesus is no longer an infant. They've been traveling so long. He's now a child, a toddler. Go find the toddler. Tell me where he is. I'll come and worship him with you. Sounds good, right? So the Magi go off, and they're entering into Bethlehem. And they're searching. And we're told in the story that the star reappears to them. And they're filled with joy because it shows them where the Christ child is. So it makes me wonder, was the star gone for a while? How did they travel in the afternoon when the sun was the brightest light in the sky? How did they travel on cloudy nights when the star was veiled from them? They had to trust during that time, didn't they? They had to maybe even stop and pause in their journey to ask the question, where are we going and why are we going? Are we still being led? Isn't that a little bit like our own spiritual journeys? When we're asking who the stars we're following, who it is we're seeking in life, is it important for us sometimes to stop and pause and ask if this is who we're truly being drawn to? If this is the right path? And they return, the children among us. And so the Magi enter the house, and they do what their hearts demand of them to do. They prostrate themselves before the child, and they open their coffers. What do they offer him? The same thing they would offer a god on an altar. Gold, frankincense, myrrh. They crown him. They burn incense to honor him. They perform ceremony to say, we trust that you are the hope of our future. And then they're given this dream. Do you pay attention to your dreams? They were given a dream about Herod's heart, about Herod's true intention, about his conniving to actually murder the Christ child, just like Pharaoh did 1,000 years earlier with the Hebrew children. Herod wanted to remove this threat to his throne, and the Magi listened to that dream, that insight, and they return by a different route. They actually had to go back a different way than they came over. They had to continue to trust. Why did they trust? Why did they make that journey back home? Because they were bringing good news. They were bringing a message of hope to their people, that one was being born into their midst who would unite them, who would bring them peace. They were confident that this new Jewish king would be the one who would bring them together as one, who would have a family reunion of all creation. This is what they saw when they gazed into that baby's face that day, into that child's face that day. They saw in them hope of one born like themselves, one who would bring their peoples freedom and peace. And it is that good news, that message, that you and I gather in today. We, the Gentiles, grafted onto this message of good news. We continue to live in that hope that Christ is bringing together a reunion of all peoples, of all creation, into the oneness of God. That is our destiny in God. That's what our hope lies in. That's what we practice Sunday after Sunday and Wednesday and Sunday here at St. Paul. So we're being invited individually to think about the star we are following today. And who is that star leading us to? Is it Christ? Is it oneness? Is it unity? Is it forgiveness? Is it compassion? And we're being invited as a community to intentionally think about the star that we are following. As a church here in Anamosa, we're trying to put together a team of visionary people from our community. A small handful of people who would dedicate themselves to keeping their eyes on the star, helping us discern the messages and the needs of our community, and to help us to decide who we will be in the future when we gaze into the face of that Christ child. When we are invited to bring good news to our community, how will we do that? What will that look like for us here at St. Paul? Do you know someone who is visionary to be a part of that team? I have 2 days to put that team together. We've been praying about this for a while, but I believe it is the time, and it's a time that's significant for us to follow the star who is Christ.